All right, welcome everybody to yet another episode of Voices of Influence. And today we're going to be talking about as you are going from that zero to one, how can you shape your content strategy? It's a topic that has been in my mind for a while because I've been in the world of video content for a while. But we have with us among us a founder of LetterDrop, Parthi. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Arjun.
So I'm very excited to talk to you. You've gotten a good uh, startup that's going on with regards to the content marketing in itself, and in general. Like I wanted to like talk to you about your zero to one journey. So let's start from where you are right now. Like it's like what was your idea to launch? What was your journey with Let It Drop?
Yeah, so with Letter Drop, I kind of organically fell into it. So for some context, I was a product manager on the search team at Google and then on G Suite. I knew I wanted to do startups, and so I left Google to essentially just start a company without a clear idea of what I wanted to start. And I spent about 18 months actually pivoting around. I shipped like
Mm-hmm.
15 different sort of like, I don't want to call them products, but like projects essentially. One of them turned into sort of like this sort of like passive micro SaaS. Another one, someone bought the code base and like whatever users we had, and the others kind of just burned to the ground. And through the process of doing that, I wanted to figure out how to grow. Like, what does growth really mean? How do you grow a product? And I hired an agency when I was doing
Mm-hmm.
that to work with me with that sort of like microsas app. And it was just not a great experience, to be
Okay.
honest. And it was interesting because part of their strategy was SEO, and I just saw firsthand how poorly people were thinking about SEO, especially somebody who used to work on the search team at Google. And so Letterdrop was really started from trying to solve my own problem over there, just being like, okay, like how do we actually help companies start thinking about organic growth, and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
built up from there. And so now we've been in business for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. Work with a lot of great logos like Gorgeous, Descript, Synac, etc. And yeah, and then we've branched quite a bit from our initial days. So now we're really helping companies think about not only like SEO and how it's changing with AI, but also how do you think about revenue attribution and what actually you're putting out there that drives revenue, so you can have that conversation with your manager. How does that influence what you put out next in your future marketing campaigns? How do you think of social selling and how all of these interact together?
Yeah, this is exciting. I actually really like this part about like how you hacked on like 15 different products and like burnt like a lot to the ground, but then like out of that one came out, and you were scratching your own itch and found this. Really like that part. I want to like talk a lot more about like like the SEO and like everything that you're talking about, but you have obviously like gone from zero to one or in the process of going there, finding product market fit and like growing from there and everything. What are some of the things that you're seeing working? And in saying that, can you also like explain to us whether you are more B2B, who's your audience, who are the people who are buying your products, and like yeah, just maybe walk us through that as well.
Absolutely. So we are a B2B company, and we primarily sell to B2B companies as well. We largely, so I think in the initial stages, if you're just getting started, I think every founder should do two things, and only two things.
Mm,
The first is outbound. So you should be
mm,
comfortable with just directly reaching out to people and trying to prospect into who you think your ICP is, and try to book meetings with them. And then the second is you need to be a person worth connecting with. And
mm,
so by that, what I mean is you need to be in the channels or communities where your target buyer is hanging out, whether that be Slack communities, whether that be LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever that may be. And you need to start talking about the problems you're solving.
mm,
So you need to start educating people. You need to be talking about these problems. You need to be showcasing your product, you really need to be somebody of interest, because look, a lot of people get a lot of cold emails from random people, and their decision to take it is going to come down to, one, your message, and then two, who is this person reaching out to me? And so if you have stuff to share and you have opinions, then you become a much more interesting person for people to have a conversation with, right? And so I think those are the two things that I would recommend every founder start off with. It's just like outbound plus showing up online wherever you're, or in person in some cases, wherever your buyer actually lives.
This is really interesting. I mean, I think like especially like people who are coming from like a product or engineering standpoint, like outbound is something that they all are like scared about or like not very comfortable with, and so that's one thing that is relatively now like almost solved for, in the sense like there are like very defined ways in which people are doing it right now, and it's there. But the other part of it, which I would love to like double click on, is like this concept of building your brand, in some ways a personal brand, in a way that makes you an interesting person, like makes you someone who is out there where the action is happening. And this is really interesting in a way. How did you go about doing this?
I think when I was initially I was just doing outbound. And I think the first person I tried selling to, or like one of the early people I tried selling to, was like, I said something along the lines of, I wouldn't buy marketing software from a company that wasn't good at marketing themselves. And so I took that very personally, and I was like, okay, I think that's a fair point. Let me get good at marketing. And so I started showing up on LinkedIn every single day, essentially, or close to every day, 5 days a week, and just sharing things I learned from our customers, things I learned from running the company, things I learned from like trying to build product features, essentially trying to help people educate themselves on like the problems that we were solving, essentially. And then initially it's pretty slow, but if you are consistent and you keep at it, you can actually see compounding results, right? And LinkedIn has gotten harder now, but I think in the first year or so, I crossed like 1 million impressions on LinkedIn. It's been challenging since, actually, like my reach is much larger. I have many more followers now in our ICP, and I think in the past trailing 12 months, my reach is only 680,000 or something like that. So it's actually decreased despite me dialing in and getting bigger. But I think that's just like LinkedIn or like any channel in general getting more saturated. However, it's still like more than worth it. Like I think 64% of our inbound comes in from LinkedIn, most of which is my LinkedIn.
I love it. It almost seems like you've sort of doubled down on this path of like sort of building the personal brand and the personal content and everything. So in general, like, tell me more about like the content strategies in itself for 0 to 1. Like, yes, there is this whole like personal brand building, like content that personal people are building, but in general, like what kind of content should people should be starting about? Because every time when you're like thinking about content, it's just so varied, right? Like everything from like SEO comes in, as well as like video content and everything. So what should like somebody who's starting out, especially in the early stages, be thinking of about content?
Yeah, so I don't think the channel matters quite as much. You will find a way to make every channel work as long as your buyer sort of is on the channel in any capacity, right?
Right.
The better way to maybe think about this is whether you want to do demand generation or demand capture first. So if you are in a large market which has a lot of existing demand, and people are out there looking for solutions, and it's not necessarily saturated yet, you can essentially just like show up and like capture a percentage of that market, right? And so I think in those cases, things like SEO, paid ads, maybe outbound, all work really well, because you're kind of living in this dream scenario where there's a lot of excess essentially demand, and people are just going around searching for solutions, and then you kind of just pop up. And so if that is your scenario, I would probably invest in demand capture first. So SEO, Google Ads, and then maybe some targeted outbound to anybody who feels like they might be in market. And so this is very bottom of funnel. This is people who are already searching for solutions. If, however, and this is most of us, you're in a space that is much more crowded, or you're building a completely new category, the things which I mentioned will still work for you. It's just that they're more saturated. And so they're a little bit more competitive. In this case, I think what I said earlier maybe makes more sense. So you want to be creating demand or doing demand generation, where you're just trying to help people understand that you even exist in the world, and like, hey, here's a new category of problems that you might be facing that we're trying to solve, or here is a new way to approach this existing problem that you've been thinking about, essentially. And you need some sort of differentiation. You can't just be like a me too product in this world. You have to say like, okay, here's how everybody else is solving it. Here's how you were underserved by existing solutions. Here is how we're solving it. And here's why the pain, like why this pain point exists. So you have to think about that. Otherwise it's not going to work. So I'd say that is how I would actually think about 0 to 1 content. It's more so rather than channels, rather think about it in terms of like, do you want to do demand capture or demand generation first? If so, you decide to do one of those, and then within those, like you'll have different channels and opportunities to go after them.
Yeah, I really like what you just said over there. Demand capture versus demand generation. It's almost like if your customer, if this is a known problem for them, or like if it's an unknown problem for them, which makes a big difference. If they know that they have this problem and they're like really searching for it, then you're like trying to like create content that like caters to that. But this is a completely different. Demand generation is where they don't even know that this problem exists, or like they actually have, you're coming up with a different way of solving for it that they have not really searching for. So this is a really good way of thinking about it. How do you work with like your customers right now, and like, what problem would you say you are solving for them?
Yeah, so I think for our current customers, we're typically working with companies which have like figured out the basics of their business. They've already maybe figured out how like outbound works to a certain degree. They have an existing marketing team. We typically sell to like Series A plus companies, at least among SaaS companies. I think our product is maybe broadly more applicable to others. We just haven't positioned it that way yet. But typically it has a marketer on staff. Marketing teams got obliterated, as we all know, last year, and so they're all understaffed. And we're really trying to help them figure out how to be more focused and efficient in terms of building organic pipeline, right? So not pipeline from paid channels or from cold outbound, but pipeline from essentially people coming in inbound or getting people who are in your ICP within your orbit. And the way we help companies do that is, one, we help them really understand, okay, what has historically worked for you? What are the pages on your website that are actually driving revenue? What are the LinkedIn posts or things you've posted which are driving revenue? What are the questions people are asking in sales calls which are blocking revenue? Once you have a good understanding of this, you can actually prioritize your efforts. So you can say, okay, there's a lot of noise out there in terms of what I could be creating or what I could be putting out there, but honestly, this is a subset of things which actually matters. Then what we do is we help you with the actual creation, with the focus on like 2 channels. One is your website, and the second is really social. But when I say social, I really mean LinkedIn. And so then we have tooling to help you SEO optimize content, help you create that stuff, make it sound a little bit more like you, all that kind of stuff. And our emphasis over here is not really helping companies just like AI generate stuff. I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is actually helping people actually get genuine insights from people who know what they're talking about. So a conversation like this, right? Like people want to learn from someone who actually knows something. and being able to translate that into your content, right? And then maximizing distribution. So we'll push it back to your website on Webflow, WordPress, HubSpot. We'll repurpose that and turn it into something that your entire social team could essentially be selling essentially. So you can actually do social selling across your team. You can be getting like all of your execs, all of your salespeople sharing stuff. You can be automating like comments, engagement with their permission across your team, and then getting the right assets back to your salesperson. So those are the 3 steps we help our customers with. 1 is identifying what they should be doing. 2 is creating it. And then 3 is distributing it and then creating that flywheel to go back. And I think there's a big place for video content in there as well. So platforms like yours, where you're helping people actually create that net new video content, like you need these, right? Because like Letterdrop will maybe help companies understand like what are the opportunities to pursue.
Right.
But you need to still go and talk to the people.
Right.
And I think that's where like running a podcast, doing these video interviews, these kinds of things are really valuable, and being able to very easily run those professionally and turn them into assets is valuable.
I really like that. I mean, I almost like the multiple things that you said over there, and let's just go one at a time over here, right? Like first, you know, video content in itself. Like I think you mentioned this, and I think while you are not personally producing video content from Letterdrop's perspective, how do you see this? How do you see that like companies are like thinking about video content right now? How should they be thinking about it? And I mean, video is becoming one of the most consumed way, like it's becoming more popular than like Google search for like some generations. And so what is your take on this, and like how should companies be thinking about this?
Yeah, so I think my take on this is actually like ideas matter more than format. If you have something important or good to say, people will beat down your door to consume it, right? PG writes essays on a website which looks like it's from the 90s, and people are like, this is some of the best stuff that I've consumed. On the flip side, you have like super rich, engaging multimedia content, but it's mostly fluff. It doesn't have anything in it. So I think the core of the idea really matters before you do anything else. Now, I think once you have that core idea, what you really should be thinking about is, how does my buyer want to consume it, right? And they might want to consume it in different ways depending on the situation they're in, right? So if you want something that's like very easy to search for, or like you have a question and you're looking for something, the reality is like, hey, like text is pretty good at being able to be indexed and searched, and like being able to be concise and targeted towards that kind of stuff. If you're looking to show up in a feed and you're looking to put a face behind it, and you're trying to build trust, and you're trying to like put a face to a name and a brand, then video becomes much more powerful than text, right? So each of these is good for different things, and I think every company should be investing in them based on like what their needs are, right? And so we personally do a mix of all that stuff, right? We will write blog posts. We do write a lot of text posts. We do host a podcast, appear on podcasts, and then use those assets as well. So I think it really just comes down to like what you want to do with it. I think the pros of video are it's like a real person, real conversation. You can build a brand, you can put a face to a name. I think there's value to that. I think the second thing is, to your point, I think there's a lot more feed type products right now. And I think that's a lot of ways in which people are consuming information, at least in those kinds of feeds. That's not to say text doesn't work. Our best performing posts historically are text posts, for what it's worth. It doesn't mean video couldn't have done that. It's just like, it seems like it doesn't matter. It could be anything. It really depends on the idea. So that's why I'd say video is pretty important. We're going to see how all this changes, right? So one of the reasons why video has become more important recently is because text has become less trustworthy. You don't know if it was AI generated and if it's coming from a credible source or not. The reality is most people actually don't care if it's coming from a credible source. I will see people who will take anything from ChatGPT as ground truth. They'll just be like, oh yeah, like, they don't understand like the intricacies of the LM, and they'll just be like, it said so, so it must be real. So I think there's that educational issue. But the second thing is like, yes, like I just don't know if I read text, I don't know if it's authentic or not. And with video, at least right now, as of March 2024, you can still mostly tell when somebody's being authentic. When do we like cross that? I've played with some of these AI avatar type things. I don't know when we cross that, but it seems like right now it seems like this is like a good medium to ensure some level of authenticity.
I really like that. I think just paraphrasing what you just said is the idea matters. The you can create different types of content, but like the idea matters more. Understanding what kind of content that your audience consumes is as important, and also it's okay to, I mean, you should be repurposing or like trying out like all these different segments, because like among your audience there might be some people interested in one versus the other, so that also makes sense. And then the last point that you mentioned, which like resonated quite a bit, is like as of today video still feels like it has like that authenticity to it. It's harder to fake than text. So I think we don't know how long it is going to be. Great points. And speaking of which, I want to jump into this whole AI part of it, right? Like you mentioned AI briefly before, saying that's not something that you recommend for like your customers to like build their content. Maybe like let's double click a little bit more on that and understand, like, you know, this AI has a role to play in the content space and may not be in creation, but like what else can AI help with? Where do you see this going in the future as well?
Yeah, so I think the bar for AI, or like the bar for being better is essentially rising, right? So I think there are, in fact, people whose jobs are being displaced by AI. That's just straight up true. Those people were never very skilled to begin with, is probably also true. And so I think, and I don't think like a lot of the stuff that they were creating was also probably not creating a lot of value, in all fairness as well. And so I think at the end of the day, we are going to see AI getting better and better. We're going to be, who knows, like approaching AGI, or like some facade or like something similar to AGI every single year. And I think when that happens, is what's essentially happening is that these LLMs essentially encapsulate all of like human knowledge that they're trained on. The hard part is more so extracting that knowledge from the LLM, really, because everything has gone in essentially. And so I think right now the best use case for all of these AI tools is for essentially repurposing, transforming a loose idea or a thought into something that's more concrete, which looks a certain type of way, but starting with like a person. I think at some point in time, a lot of these LLMs will be able to answer questions or say things that are insightful, beyond what like your average person can do. Like their IQ essentially rises. And so I think in order for a person to warrant creating something, like the bar goes up. Like you need to really know what you're speaking about, or you need to be speaking about something very novel for it to be worth speaking about, because otherwise you're competing against zero cost content that is right from AI. And so I think anybody thinking about AI to create more mediocre content is just thinking about it wrong. There is no defensibility. There's no alpha to be captured there. You need to be
Right.
thinking about how can you be doing things differently and focusing on what content you can create that is unique, and then just use AI to assist you, take like save you time and nothing more for now.
I like it. Um, yeah, I think this idea of like you need to like compete with AI in like realms that it's not good at and be differentiating yourself in a way is where it is. So original thought, novel thoughts is kind of where it is right now because AI is basically like it can only say things that it already knows. So you got to be better than that, which is a big bar in itself because it knows a lot. So there's a lot, but there are differentiated way of thinking and differentiated way of doing this. Makes people think about that, and I also like that. Uh, I think AI is like doing a great job with being able to like repurpose content and like take content and like do bring it into different formats that doesn't exist, which is all like probably good things that like every company should start leveraging. But at the same time, uh, creating content or original content should still be something that you are creating. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the last topics that I want to discuss with you before we jump into that our game is this idea of social selling. Because now, when it comes to, and I think we touched upon this from a content perspective, but also from that personal branding perspective, is ultimately everyone right now are leveraging platforms like LinkedIn as well as like different like right now even in TikTok and YouTube and everybody like people are like using that channel for selling, and not just the founders and the founder brand in itself, but the company. Like you are a cybersecurity company, you want to put your like chief security officer or like your chief engineer at the forefront and like building their brand around the technology expertise that they have and leveraging that for your company's brand. Talk to me about like how a you have done it for your company, and you mentioned this a little bit, but go a little bit deeper into this. And b, how should like early stage startups, 0 to 1 startups, start doing this practically, right? Like just practical steps on how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the super detailed version, you can search letter drop LinkedIn SaaS playbook. Just search it on Google,
Okay.
you'll find it. But I go in depth on like step by step how you can go from 0 to 1 on LinkedIn as a SaaS company that wants a social sell. So if you want the real detailed version, just search for letter drop LinkedIn SaaS playbook on Google and you'll find it. There's still a use
we'll
case for
we'll
Google
link it to the
Code.
show notes.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
link that to the show notes for sure.
Yeah. And you could ask ChatGPT too and see like what the delta between those two is. And hopefully I'm adding sufficient value to be better than ChatGPT for you to want to Google that. But going back to your question, I think I actually listened to a podcast from Tim Jerka, the one of the director of engineering who actually runs the LinkedIn feed algorithm. His team runs that. And one of the things he mentioned was how LinkedIn is really focused, kind of similar to Google, on essentially being this repository of all professional knowledge, right? So they're limiting it to like professional knowledge. And they want people to do less self promotion, just like Facebook, Instagram style, like social media get a lot of likes, and instead focus more on like, okay, how do you create value? How do you share actual knowledge and expertise? Their mission is to essentially connect professionals with economic opportunity. That is their stated mission. And so their stated mission is to help you find a job, is to help you connect to buyers, is help to help you like professionally network. And so they want to help people creating content that will achieve one of those three goals, right? And so if you are creating content that's going to educate, that's going to help you stand out. And so I think people should stop thinking about LinkedIn in terms of like, hey, this is the same as Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, and more so think about it in terms of like, this is an education channel for me to my buyers. And so the things which matter are be consistent, be helpful, be educational, show up every day and share what you're learning. Go the extra mile, like go do some research and share it publicly. Share a customer conversation you had where you learned something. Don't just talk about your product, like mix it up a little is what I'd say first. The second thing I would say is make sure your page is set up to be a sales page. Your LinkedIn profile is not a resume, it's actually a sales page. So make sure like your cover photo, your follow me, your website, everything's linked in there in your bio, everything looks like a sales page. The third thing I would say is you want to be connecting and interacting with people. And so you should be aggressively trying to network and connect with people who are your potential buyers. So you shouldn't just be posting, but you should also make sure you're connecting with people so that they follow you, so that your post can be seen and you can eventually have a conversation with them, be in their comments, have conversations, all that kind of stuff. Once you have consistently done this yourself and you can show true ROI, then you can take it to your team. Make sure you have analytics set up. Make sure for your company you have a how did you hear about us form so that people can report whether it came from LinkedIn. Make sure you have some sort of like Clearbit or equivalent on your website so that you can see which accounts are on your website, so that you can be like I saw that person liking my post earlier. Now they're on my website, and tools like LetterDrop actually help you tie that journey together. And then once you've successfully done this and you can prove the ROI for yourself, then you can actually expand this to the rest of your team. Two things there. It is not helpful for you to just get your entire team liking your posts. What you really need is the right people liking your post, the right people sharing, the right people commenting. So there's only two groups of people who matter. One is your customers or people who match your buyer persona. So if you can get a customer advisory board, partners, or anybody like that commenting, liking your stuff, engaging with you, that's good. They'll redistribute. LinkedIn will learn like, hey, Parthi's posts resonate really well with B2B marketers because they've historically liked and commented, so I'll share it to more people. So that's one way to do it. Second way to do it is to get people who are connected to your buyers, so your sales team, because they're prospecting into them. Especially if you're running an ABM playbook, like you need to be doing this. Your executive team, these people, their network is a lot of your buyers. They also, when they comment, like, share, like a lot of these people see it. These are the only two people who need to be engaging with it. I will see a lot of people who try to use our product, and then they'll add a bunch of their engineers to it. And then their buyer is like in HR. And I'm like, you're just tricking LinkedIn into thinking that your content is for engineers. That's not what you need to be doing. You need to be networking within like your target market. It has to be either your buyer or people who are connected to your buyer. Nobody else matters.
I love it. This is so much to unpack over here. And I think I'm not going to even try to paraphrase this. I would rather just like put the link to your like more detailed article over here. I think this is a lot to unpack over here. And maybe just as a last one part of it is you mentioned that like when you started, like you were just spending like, like the 5 days and everything. When did you start like looping in like your team and like saying that like, it's like, hey, everybody should also be, I mean, not necessarily like to like your post or like just add value to yours, but in general, building a brand for themselves in a way that like refers to brand. When did you start like looping in like the rest of the team as well?
I mean, given that our product helps with social selling, and I think we're very unique, I mandate our entire go-to-market team to do it. So anytime anyone joins, like their LinkedIn's connected, where they're posting their own content, our marketing team is posting content on their behalf. That's just happening. It's very effective. I've got people like offhanded, like they've made remarks offhand saying like, oh yeah, like I see LetterDrop everywhere. They must have a really big marketing team. And the reality is we don't. We're still a fairly lean startup, and we are just consistent. And then we just have a handful of people showing up, And that's enough, honestly, to get you pretty far. And so I think the bar is pretty low. I think a lot of people are shy to, like, one of the reasons why video content is hard is that people are shy to put their face on camera. It's really hard to do that. People are shy to post on social media. 99% of people are just lurking. 1% of people are creating. And so I think there's a lot of marketing where people are just like not willing to put in the work, or they're scared, or they're shy. And I think my response to that is, if you really care about your metrics, if you really care about moving the number, I think this is one of those really easy, low-hanging fruit things you can do to stand out and be differentiated, as opposed to sticking with the really like plain old playbooks. And there's a place for them, don't get me wrong. But if all you do is just pump out white papers
Case
and
studies, yeah,
send
I know
a
what you mean.
cold email from like a random person who might not even exist in a large sequence, I think you're going to probably lose out to a company that's really thinking about, how do we build a brand with our customer? How do we get that recall so that they think about us first whenever they have a problem?
Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Parthi, this was great. I'm gonna finish off with like a few, like just 3 or 4 rapid fire questions, just to get like your style of startup building. These are like more, put as like this or that. Just from your perspective, what is your style for startup building? Just answer these questions. So again, your style, how would you fund your startup? Bootstrap, VC backed?
Bootstrapped until you need to be VC backed. But start with bootstrap.
Okay, so bootstrap is where you would start, and that's your thing. Maybe briefly tell me why.
I think most companies should not be VC backed. I think you should bootstrap as long as you can until you clearly have that signal that there is something here and then you need to pour more capital into it.
I love it. Perfect. What is your working style for the founding team? Hustle, 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 or work-life balance and everything?
The non-PC answer is hustle. The reality is, like, startups are really hard and you do need to hustle, and it is not balance. Yeah, it's just the harsh reality.
No, that's good. That's exactly like what I wanted to hear. That's perfect. Okay, your motive when you hit roadblocks, is your intuition to iterate or pivot?
That's a really hard one. I think iterating is probably the right one, but there's always, like, enough iteration will either lead you down the right path or tell you like you've collected enough data to pivot. But my default is like, I think it's better to iterate and then pivot once you're truly out of ideas.
I love it. If you were to focus on growth, are you focusing on revenue or usage?
I would say revenue is probably a better indicator. It's a combination of both. Usage is like a leading indicator. Revenue is kind of like a lagging indicator. But I think revenue keeps the lights on, so I'd start with that. That said, it's completely possible to build a company where you have a lot of revenue and then you just also have a lot of churn.
Right. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. This is great. These are the questions that I had, and I loved all your answers. And thanks for coming over here today and like giving us your thoughts, as well as discussing some really like some topics in like real depth, which I really appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.